Hello, my name is Ann Poulson and I work for the Henry Art Gallery. In the past couple of videos that I've made, I've talked a little bit about labels and about cataloging, which is when we gather information for our database and for our records. And something that's come up a little bit in each one of those videos is how artwork enters our collection. So I wanted to talk more about that today. So there's that scene in Harry Potter when he goes to Gringotts Bank for the first time and they open the vault. He's got this huge pile of money. Well, let me assure you now, very few museums have huge piles of money for anything, and definitely not for buying works of art or whatever it is that they collect. So fortunately for us, there are a lot of other ways that works come into our collection, and I'm going to tell you about some of those today. I also want to talk about how a museum decides what to collect, what kind of parameters or limits or goals it might have when it is creating a collection. So let's start with some of the ways that museums get things. This painting, Trouville Harbor by Eugène-Louis Boudin, is one of the first works of art that entered the collection at the Henry Art Gallery when it was founded in 1926. Horace C. and Susan Henry had spent a lot of their lives collecting a pretty amazing group of works of art. And when Horace died, he left a lot of those works of art and some funds, some money, to the University of Washington to found the Henry Art Gallery. And you can see that it is credited to the Horace C. Henry collection. It's that whole group of works that was left to the university to found the museum. Another way is through an endowment fund. So this work, which is Untitled $1 Do We Dream Under the Same Sky by Rukrit Teravanija, you can see here in the credit line, purchased with funds from the Ambrose M. and Viola H. Patterson Endowment Fund. And that means that Ambrose and Viola Patterson left money to the Henry specifically to acquire works of art. So that becomes an endowment fund, and it's money that we can pull from every once in a while when we want to acquire a certain type of work of art. So what about this piece, Empire by Corey Newkirk? You can see in the credit line where it says purchased with funds provided by Rebecca and Alexander Stewart. And that sounds really similar to some of the endowment funds or the acquisition funds that we just talked about, but this isn't an endowment like how Viola and Ambrose Patterson left that money to be used. This means that Rebecca and Alexander Stewart provided the funds specifically for us to acquire this piece. Sometimes that means that we wanted to get a particular work of art, and so we contacted some people and said, you know, we really love this artist and we think that this is something that you would want to be involved in. Or sometimes it's people who say like, hey, I would love to give you the money to buy this particular work. Is that something that you want? There are lots of different ways that is handled and approached, but it usually means that somebody gave us the money and then we were then able to buy a fantastic piece like this, which again, we always love and appreciate. So again, I know lots of very similar words here. This is Black Painted Lawn with White Fence by Andrew Dadson, and you can see according to the credit line, it's the Brink Award purchase with funds from John and Sherry Banky. So Sherry and John very generously funded the Brink Award, which was for artists who lived in Washington, Oregon, or British Columbia and who were at the early stages of their careers. And one of the winners was Andrew Dadson, and this is the work that the Henry was able to acquire from the exhibition that we put on after he won that award. So that is another way that works can come into the collection can be through these specific types of awards, which again, were funded by some very generous benefactors. So this piece, which is Untitled by Peter Marianus Kempferman, came to us as a bequest of Mildred Isaacs. And that means that Mildred Isaacs decided that she wanted to leave this piece to us when she died. And she was kind enough to think of us that way and to put it in her will that she wanted this particular work of art to go to the Henry. And so once she passed away, then this work of art came to us and we have labeled it as a bequest. And what about this? This is Village Gossip by Herbert Gershner, and it came to us as a transfer from the School of Art Library. So sometimes different parts of campus, especially because we are part of the University of Washington, they might have had some art or some works that would have been better cared for and shared with the public by being part of the Henry Art Gallery than where they had been. For instance, a School of Art library. And so they were transferred from being owned by or cared for that particular unit over to us. And then there are gifts. So many of the things that we have in the Henry's collection were gifted to us. Somebody might contact us, like Mr. Albert A. Feldman, who wrote to us one day and said, I have this collection and I would like to give some of it to you. Would you be interested? And then we would go and take a look at it and we would see what kind of condition it was in, what kind of objects he had, and we would make a decision. And he gave us a really amazing collection of prints, which we love to share with people. So that brings up another point, though, which is you have to make a decision when somebody offers something to you, whether you are going to accept it. Now, hopefully when somebody gives you a present, you are very kind and polite and you say thank you. This is a little bit of a different situation because when something comes to a museum, even if it comes to us as a gift, that means that we are going to spend quite a bit of time and money over the years taking care of it. And we also need to make sure that when we are doing that, that it fits our museum's mission and our collecting policy. So what are those? Well, the Henry Art Gallery's mission is to engage all people in the transformative power of contemporary art and ideas. So this is our mission, and everything that we do and everything that we have should work towards this goal. So how do we make sure that all of the art in our collection does that? Well, that's a really good question. And that has to do with our collecting policy. And that establishes the type of works that we will take and the categories that we will take and what we won't take. So there are all kinds of museums, right? I mean, there are natural history museums, there are art museums, there are museums about hot dogs and bad art and toilets. There are museums that tell stories. There are museums about locations. And there are just like any kind of thing you can think about. There's probably a museum where you can learn more about it and see more about it. If you had a hot dog museum, hopefully you'd have some hot dogs in it or something about hot dogs. Would you have any hamburgers? What about ketchup and mustard and relish? Would you have buns? Would you put bread? Because sometimes people use regular bread as buns. Would you have different things that show hot dogs but aren't actually hot dogs, like a photograph of a hot dog or a package that held some hot dogs that somebody kept for some reason? Or would you have maybe like a pin that somebody made in the shape of a hot dog? What about a hot dog costume for a wiener dog? Like, would you have that in your hot dog museum? There are all sorts of things to think about when you're deciding what you're going to have, because there are some things that no museum has. And one of the first of those is space. So you always have to be able to take good care of what you bring into your collection. You have to have enough room for it, and you have to have enough people to take care of it. And that means you can't take everything. And that's part of why we have these policies, is to help us limit what we're going to have so that we know we'll be able to take care of it and that it's going to help us forward and advance our mission. So I asked my young friend Darby what kind of a museum she would like to have if she could start one. And she really wanted to tell the story of the Radium Girls. So those are a bunch of women who worked at 3 different factories in the United States between the 19-teens and into the 1920s. And they painted watch dials with radium to give it glow in the dark. The problem with that was that they didn't know that the radium could kill them, did actually kill a lot of them because it's not safe. And they were told to lick their brushes to keep them nice and pointed for the delicate work on the dials. And so this was a very big scandal when it was realized how dangerous this was for these women. So it tells the story about working conditions and women's health and women at work and radium, which was still relatively newly understood. And so technology and science, when you think about Marie Curie and that discovery, it tells lots of really great stories. So thinking a little bit about that, and maybe if you know somebody who knows more about the Radium Girls, you can always call in a friend. But why don't you pause the video for a moment and think about what kind of things you might want to tell a story like that, to tell a story about people at work, people in unsafe conditions, anything like that. So pause. You can call in a friend if you want some help. You can talk them through it. You can write down the list, however works best for you. Okay, so how'd that go? What kind of things did you come up with? I was thinking a little bit about it, and I would think that Darby would probably love to have some photographs of the women and the factories where they worked, maybe even some of the actual paintbrushes that they used so that we could see in the museum how they had to keep those bristles of the brushes nice and sharp so that when they painted that it came out right. Maybe some of the watches that they made. Maybe we could have some letters that they wrote to people talking about their job. Maybe notes from when they went to see the doctor. Maybe the doctors wrote something. Maybe legal documents from the trials. I mean, there's so many different ways that you could amass this really interesting collection that could help tell that story. So I hope you might have fun thinking about the different kinds of things that you would have if you started a museum. First of all, what kind of a museum would it be? It could be anything, right? So just think about that and have some fun with it. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.